Hey everybody, it's Robert Phoenix, and we are live with the Friday FARcast. It is the 25th of January, and we are squarely in the sign of Aquarius. And I thought it would be a really appropriate time to bring on Masaki Miyagawa, who is a really interesting cat. What's going on, man?
Yeah, glad to be here, Robert. Had my Brazilian coffee. I'm wide awake.
Right on,
So,
man.
yeah.
Cool. Good. So we're in the time of Aquarius. Oh, hold on one second. I like hearing myself, but not that much. So being that we're in the month of Aquarius, it's really, I think, incumbent upon us to look at solutions that are cutting edge, outside the box, quantum, post new age. And I thought you'd be a really interesting person to bring on the show because you and I have had a number of conversations, vis-a-vis Facebook and messaging, and I felt a really interesting connection with you. The more that I learned about your work, I thought you'd be a perfect guest for the show, especially because one of the things that I'm involved with is trying to give people solutions to get through whatever third dimensional reality we're experiencing. And of course, with 5G, breathing down our neck, it's like we need all the tools that are available to us in order to continue to live in a way that's, holistic and healthy and keeping our spirits aligned with our body and our experience in 3D. So you're the man, you're going to be the man for the next 2 hours. And we're here to explore what some of those solutions are. And you're going to be our guide to take us into the radical realm of quantum healing and radionics and Rife machines and Orgone. And let's kick this thing off, man. So tell people a little bit about yourself. I know that you come from a long line of Zen monks, and you've got a lot of history and background in this field, but give people a little bit of a thumbnail snapshot of who you are and where you come from.
Well, my name's Masaki Miyagawa. Very Japanese name, but I'm actually, I think, Robert, you grew up in California, right? Japanese Americans, one of the first Asian immigrants, along with the Chinese. So my family, they came to the West Coast 1930s. So we've been here quite a while. Actually, both my parents were born in the World War II concentration camps. And my mom's side is a Buddhist priest. Actually, you know what? It's interesting you said Zen monk.
Yeah.
Because now my family, my mom's side, they're what they call Jodo Shinshu, or it's a Pure Land, the Amida Buddha, which is separate from Zen. But they were probably started as Zen because around 1600, there was a major war in Japan. It's sort of like Italy, where there was a lot of different separate states, and then they had a warring states period. They began to consolidate, and you just got to two sides. My mother's side was on the losing side, and so they were samurai, which is kind of unusual. Most Japanese that came over were farming stock, like my dad's side's farming stock, but my mom's side, they probably started out as Zen. And they had to move far away from where they were from, because at that time, you either had to suicide or change profession. So I'm assuming they said, we're not about the seppuku or harakiri, so we're going to change profession. They probably became Zen, and then they switched to
Buddhism,
the Amida Buddha, because the Pure Land is more the farmer's religion. So maybe a bigger base of support. But, I grew up I grew up like any other American, but I grew up in the temple hearing the stories of the Buddha. It's actually Vedic. It's an offshoot. Buddhism is an offshoot of Vedism. And that's very interesting because you never think that Buddhism would connect to pyramids. I'm most well known for the Orgone pyramids that I make. I think I have one right here. Some people, they may have been to a holistic fair, or you may have heard about these, but these are basically energy tools, right? So it sounds maybe crazy or flaky, but just a simple combination of plastic resin, metal particles or metal shavings, quartz crystal, I know you know about the shungite. I put shungite in here.
Mm-hmm.
Just this, which is actually, if you think about it, this is not mass produced by a factory. This is like I make these by hand.
Mm-hmm.
It will actually harmonize or neutralize the harmful component that's in electrical signals today, such as Wi-Fi. Even the wiring in your house, it has a chaotic element that's not really talked about in the mainstream science.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, a lot of people have heard about Tesla or so-called ether physics. There is a kind of like a precursor wave or another bandwidth that we are not told about.
Mm-hmm.
But and it has many names. They call these. Some people call it orgonite. I don't anymore because the guy put a copyright on orgonite.
Really?
You can say Orgone pyramid.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Energy pyramid. But so there was Wilhelm Reich. He was Austrian psychologist.
Yeah, it came out of the Freud school.
Yeah, and a lot of the very interesting energy sciences,
Mm-hmm.
they were coming out around the time of Tesla, but by World War II they shut it down because this kind of energy is so fundamental to creation that if you understand it, it is extremely powerful. So if you're going to physics department at UCLA, you'll never hear about it. But once you graduate and go work for like Northrop Grumman or Boeing, they said, okay, now we're going to teach you the real physics.
Oh, interesting. Wow.
Because basically it explains all psychic phenomena.
Mm-hmm.
It explains paranormal phenomena. And it's basically what the Nazis were working with to create the Nazi bill or the Die Glocke, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's the ether physics. So names for this would be Orgone, Chinese called Qi, Japanese same thing. We say Ki, but my name Masaki is the true or correct Qi or Ki.
Right.
Prana, Polynesians say mana. So all cultures, they had a very good sense of the framework that we live in.
Right. Wouldn't the Greeks have used the word pneuma? Right. Wouldn't it be pneuma?
Everybody. And see, this is the thing too, because you start getting into this area and you will start to get into some controversial topics also. Because, I come from a purely Buddhist tradition. I'm American, but, I grew up with a very Buddhist Japanese influence. But what and maybe sometimes you have to be a semi-outsider to start seeing these things. But in the last 5 years, because I've been working with pyramids, and I would say working with any energy tool, but pyramids, I work with pyramids every day. It led me to the topic of the old Slavic culture, Russia. We know Russia it's on the tip of everybody's tongue in the last couple of years.
Right.
And actually, Buddhism, Vedism. We know the Nazis were highly interested in Buddhism.
Absolutely.
The swastika culture.
Absolutely.
And so I think that there is only one story on this planet, and we are all connected to it. But I think particularly the swastika culture is connected to the Eurasian steppes and the culture of the far north. And what country dominates the far north? Well, it's Russia.
Right.
So the whole pyramid thing is like, it's at the basic, if you're talking about, these energy pyramids, you put it on your bedstand, and if it's properly made and it's strong, you'll get better sleep. They don't really block, they don't shield out, but they harmonize, because we have two directions. We kind of have like entropy and breakdown or chaos and higher levels of order. And basically the energy coming off of the Wi-Fi, and we have this 5G coming out, it's chaotic. So you could say it's anti-biological. But there is a rule. There's kind of a spiritual rule that you have free will, and you can, anything that comes at you, you can counter it and flip it, just like Aikido, right? And the time we're in, and every day we move forward, things are becoming more abstracted. They're becoming more virtual. It's like that Aquarian air sign. Even, the sign of Aquarius kind of looks like a Wi-Fi symbol almost, right?
Yeah.
So on the negative side, we have things like the 5G network, which is rolling out now across the world. And it's basically, it's a millimeter wave. It's a microwave.
That's right.
It's the same that they use in the full body scanners at the airport, where you're having all those cancer clusters, right?
Yeah.
But on the opposite end, one, for practicality, just to make sure you're covered, there's a whole range of energy tools that they don't really block out these signals, but what they do is they neutralize that chaotic component. And what I often compare it to is, I think we've all been to a concert, whether it's a band, a rock concert, or maybe a rave or electronic show. If things are dialed in, you got the function one, the turbo sound, you could be actually right up to the speaker all day, and you'll have little to no ringing in your ears. But if things are on the red, if there's distortion, you want to leave them 5 minutes, because it's like daggers on your ear, right? But if you would look at the waves coming out of the speakers, the distorted sound is not a clean sine wave. It has jaggies. There's distortion.
It's a saw wave.
Right. Yeah. So it's kind of similar with this etheric bandwidth, that if you have a chaotic component in it, when it hits your body, you're getting like hammered all day, right? But if the waves are smoothed out, then it's not like you're not, encountering these waves, right, coming off the Wi-Fi, but you don't get that fatigue, that computer fatigue.
Right.
So typically, even within the first night, if you have a good orgone or orgonite pyramid, you're going to sleep better.
Yeah.
And it's just something that most people do not think about, because it's invisible to the naked eye. But if you would look on your Wi-Fi dropdown, like how many hotspots do you see? I know, I'm in LA. I see at least 20. Right. And I'm not in an apartment block. I'm in a residential area with houses.
Yeah.
So going into the future, they actually have, I've been told, they have like 6G and whatever.
Yeah, they're going to go beyond 5. Absolutely.
So going into the future, it's not really something that you have to be afraid about, but you have to be conscious about, because as far as I know, they're rolling out 5G in LA now, but I don't really feel, I think eventually probably I will have to leave LA, because it's just, the best is just like a smart meter, best just not to have that around. But you can knock out a lot of this harmful effect by wearing, you might have heard about the tensor ring pendants, right?
Right. Yeah.
Copper pendants.
Right.
I use a combination of these along with the pyramids, and I feel fine. And there's a fun thing about it too, because once you're covered, then the energy in your space, like your home is your castle. You're not just being protected, but this kind of the energy in your space is being pushed up into the areas of the dreamscape of the conscious collective. Like, I look back from when I first started to now, I'm making power devices and I'm messing with
right. So you're tapping into something.
You get a bump in consciousness.
Yeah,
it's really true. This
goes back to Wilhelm Reich, who's a very controversial character in a lot of ways, because there's some material out there that he might have been involved in some weird sexual predilections. I'm not sure if that's out there to assassinate his character or but there's some darker material around Reich, but there's also some other material where obviously the guy's he's a bit of a visionary, and he wrote a book called Links from Space. Do you know that book?
I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, Links from Space. And he talks, it's a small book. I think it was actually written by his son, if I'm not mistaken now.
Mm-hmm.
And it talks about how he and his father were in contact with
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
this extraterrestrial energy. And at one point, when they were living in the United States and in upstate New York, they actually had an Orgone cannon, and they were taking UFOs out of the sky with this Orgone cannon. So at some point, Reich must have tapped into this energy field that you're talking about,
Sure.
so that he could advance his work.
Well, once you start working with these tools consistently or just have them around, things start happening.
Yeah.
Synchronicities, vivid dreams. If you're running a powered frequency, you could set it to, everything's a frequency. So there's like mental ones. I'm actually running Schumann right now. So it's like a very grounding earth vibration.
Right.
And, you can kind of you can accelerate or boost certain effects. So if you do like 432, which is like crown, you're pulling that in. I usually run a grounding frequency or a mental one, which is around like 14 hertz. But you will start getting a lot of ideas. And sometimes, I'm sure from looking at the natal chart, I do some numerology readings, so I could tell just running the numbers if somebody's like an open channel or psychic channel.
Right.
Those people will tend to just get it automatically from their setup. I don't typically get stuff just shooting in like that. Like if I'm viewing something, I have to think about it. But when you start running a powered pyramid, then I start to get those things coming in, and then a lot of times it's not logical. You have to kind of decode it, but it definitely has an effect. And Ra Castaldo, I think I found your stuff through him. He might have mentioned Robert Phoenix, but he has, he's already like a Strega background, very intuitive.
Yeah, Ra's he's a pyramid unto himself, right? I mean,
right.
Yeah.
But he has my tools now, and he's going to the moon. You gotta think somebody that's already like open and had all those kinds of experiences. Yeah. So he really likes. If you do any kind of body work, hands-on healing, meditation, any kind of what they call scalar energy too. They call the Orgone. They can the more, I guess, the technical or scientific term would be scalar, or Russian called torsion field, because it's kind of like a vortex spinning energy.
Yeah.
If you have a high scalar potential in the room while you're doing your energy work, it really boosts the effect, so psychic work, healing work, those kinds of things. So it's very exciting, I think. But it's obvious, going back to the whole 5G, it's really harmful, but at the same time, I kind of see it also as an acceleration. For every effect is a equal opposite, pushback. Absolutely. So it's like, to really survive, people are going to have to go in this. I'm sure there's going to be people that are going to get sick, and they're going to.
They already are. They're having problems. Yeah.
So they're going to seek out solutions that way.
Right.
I also, every day I have people contacting me, and there's some kind of seed in them. Somehow the subconscious is pushing them. Like, I really feel I should look into this. And, it's not like they're, feeling like I'm sick and I have to seek it out. It's like there's some little scratch or itch or voice that's pushing them. So they're going to get covered that way.
Right.
And I think also one great thing with energy tools, I focus, my specialty is more the pyramids. I do work with like tensor tools, but there's a whole range of things out there. But one thing about it is these kinds of things, like the Orgone pyramids, people can come to it in many ways. You can go buy it from somebody. you can make it yourself, because it's kind of a DIY. That's one of the great things when these kind of pyramids came about in the 90s. It was a DIY movement.
Mm-hmm.
And the country, you talk about it on your show every day. The country is so fractured and divided right now
Mm-hmm.
that you may not be able to reach an amicable, conclusion in conversation with people, because the bias or the wall comes down within two sentences in.
Absolutely.
You're like, I'm on this side, you're on that side.
That's right. Yeah.
But if you, because the main objective, I think a lot of people, even me myself, sometimes we lose perspective, and there's just people out there that you're never going to agree with, right?
That's right.
But we're all on this planet. We all want to live happy, productive lives. So how about we go around the bias and just hit the energetic layer? And you say, you don't talk about Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative. You say, hey, check this out. Why don't you put it on your bedstand? Mm-hmm. And then the next day they say, hey, it's really weird, but I got better sleep.
Mm-hmm.
We all won.
Right.
So I think whatever walk of life, whatever this philosophical background, people can come to these energy tools in any way. So I think that's really, when I hit upon this, or I thought about this, it was maybe the first year that I was doing this, maybe 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I felt a great release, because I think you and, Ra and many of our friends and your listeners, we naturally have been into these topics for many years, decades. But I think you can kind of get stuck in the conspiracy, or you could conspiracy reality. I know conspiracy facts, right?
Right.
But there's some of these things that practically you as one person, you can't do anything about. Mm-hmm. And then it's kind of like, well, what do? I can't do anything.
Right.
But if you have some of these tools, or I think it's even more empowering when you make it yourself, and the instructions are online. The first one may not come out like an art piece, but it'll work. If you have the combination of materials, you just follow the directions. Mm-hmm. You could use resin or even Bondo, quartz crystal, some shavings you got off of eBay. Mm-hmm. You say, I made something with my hands, and, I use it, or I gave it to somebody. I get the feedback. Mm-hmm. Hey, I got better sleep. I'm feeling better.
Yep.
That's a win. That's total release, because now you're no longer in the, man, this world is jacked up. What are we going to do?
Yeah, right. I mean, it's about people taking ownership of mm-hmm. their bodies, their place, their space, their sovereignty.
It's taking your power back.
Your creative process, and being engaged in a way that takes us off the hook of feeling like mm-hmm. we're at the effect of some cause, or, for lack of a better term, victimhood, right? I mean, mm-hmm. and we're in a period now where Uranus is going to be in Taurus for the next 7 years. Mm-hmm. And this is a really exciting time to be involved with the creation of materials, whether they're earth-based materials like the shavings or the crystals, and then we're adding them to like a polymer, or something synthetic, which is very Uranian. Taurus, very earthbound. Mm-hmm. This next 7 years, we could see a real explosion in these kinds of technologies, and could be very, very helpful and beneficial as we basically are running the dark Atlantean program versus the lighter or the redemptive Atlantean program. And I think that's kind of where we are. 5G to me is dark Atlantean. We're looking at the kind of an iteration of what caused a global catastrophe, right? Mm-hmm. But the same technology that caused that global catastrophe, or led to that global catastrophe, was also part and parcel of how the Atlanteans really ramped up so quickly and were able to connect in with mm-hmm. these higher frequencies and begin to change the world at a technological level. So the two are interlinked, and we're kind of coming back around again, and we're really coming into that focal point where Pluto's coming into Aquarius, and we're going to be dealing with this Atlantean vortex, or the Aquarian vortex. And I think this is great. I think it's really timely. What I'd like to know is, how did you get into this? Where was your entry point?
Well, I had a few pyramids from Organized Africa. It's George Rischel, right? He says George, but I think since he's a German expat, he lives in Johannesburg.
Right.
It's probably Georg, but George.
Yep.
Great company. They've been around a long time. So I had a couple of their pyramids, but I never thought about making it. And then it was around 2014. Somehow I got in my mind. I said, you know what? I'm going to try this out. And then, I'm American, but, if you've if you ever dealt with Japanese people, Robert, we get kind of obsessed. So I started making them every day for about 5 weeks. And maybe after like 20, 30 pyramids, I got it to a point where, because my objective, or like my aesthetic, is, and you can check them out at kaida.com. My aesthetic is form and function, and that kind of Japanese minimalism. So I want it very clean, simple, but it has to have the power too, and I got it to that point. But this is really interesting. So it was like maybe 5 weeks out, and I had just put some pieces in a friend's art gallery here in LA. Nobody bought any, but lataco.com, it's a graffiti and food site, LA Taco. They've actually overtaken, in my opinion, LA Weekly now, because LA Weekly got bought up by a corporate conglomerate.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the community news is coming out on LA Taco. There's nothing more LA than that, right?
Right.
But I was on there. Very well known. If I said the name, you guys would know. Very well known Hollywood, young Hollywood person contacted me, and they wanted to do pyramids. So 5 weeks out from zero, I was up in a big house teaching some young Hollywood people about pyramids. And that's the thing too, Robert. I haven't been doing this that long. It was like 5 years. But you would be surprised who's into pyramid power. Because
actually, I probably wouldn't, because it feels to me like that's kind of a crustal layer, of the elite pyramid structure. Right?
The pyramid, right?
Right. You go up to the top, and these people, they've known about this for years, for centuries.
Well, you have to think too. Once you have all the money, then you want things that are occulted. You want the hidden energy, and pyramids is a great entryway into understanding energy. And I think, I know many of your listeners are readers themselves. They do body work. They're into energy work.
Absolutely.
And so it's very interesting. And I actually, I took a year-long course in psychic development here in LA like 10 years ago. It was mainly for myself to do all my karmic excavation and clean myself out.
Right.
But it was very interesting because I never thought I would apply it in the way I'm doing now. I think that's one reason why, in my opinion, I'm a little bit higher than a lot of the people doing pyramids, because now I'm working with power devices, and I can test, and I can see. Well, anybody can test. Yesterday, the muscle test, the kinesthesiology, common test to test energy tools, how strong it is. Or some people use a pendulum dowsing. But I can look at a photo like on Instagram, or I can look at something, and I can, in general, tell where it is. And then if I get a hold of it, I can test it. But being familiar with energy work and using the pyramid as an entryway, it's a great and fun way to get into these energies, because you can see, okay, I have an idea that if I use, say, like kyanite or black tourmaline or shungite, and I put it in, it's going to be stronger. And you test it and you go, yep, it's stronger. And I'll tell you, real gold, very powerful. And I didn't do it for a long time because it's expensive, right?
Yeah.
But when I put real gold in the pyramids, like, man, it is strong.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Reason why the ancients were
That's right.
gold.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, talk about this pyramid. I pulled this off your website.
Sure.
It's totally beautiful. What's going on inside of here?
Okay, so this is a powered pyramid. Basically, you're using an antenna coil cast into a pyramid, and you use a frequency generator. I actually have. Let me unplug. Well, they can't see it. Well, can they? Can they see me?
Yeah.
I have a frequency generator here, so you can put 432. The current goes out through the cable, and it goes into the pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
And there's different kinds of coils. The typical one you'll see is just like a helix, a twist, and they'll wrap it around the crystal.
Mm-hmm.
I used to do that too. But this particular donut-looking coil is what they call a Rodin coil from Marco Rodin. He's not that old. He's probably like in his 40s or 50s or something. But he came out with vortex math. And so this particular coil, they say, is 60% more efficient than any other kind of antenna coil.
Mm-hmm.
It's has that 369 Tesla vortex going on.
Mm-hmm.
And basically the energy falls into like a black hole and this recycles. Mm-hmm. And the field it throws out is torus. Mm-hmm. So, and this is the natural shape of, say, the galaxy. Mm-hmm. Your aura is actually not an egg. It's a torus that starts from the heart center. Mm-hmm. So that's significant. The wrapping in, I mean, it almost looks like a crystal. I have to hand wrap these. Mm-hmm. It takes a bit of time, but and I think I'm the only one right now that's doing this cast in, because trust me, people could take this idea, you can try it out, but trust me, it took me because all this is custom.
Right.
Like I make all the parts, I'm wrapping all the parts.
Yep.
There's some electronic components inside that you don't see.
Yeah.
But the crossing, the significance of this is the crossing of the wire. When you have two electromagnetic fields, so if you put a current through a wire, right, there's a magnetic field around it.
Right.
If you have two magnetic fields in opposition, 180-degree opposition, mm-hmm. And you put, like, say, a square wave through it, so just a pulse, right?
Yep.
That energy disappears from the regular EMF and it goes to the ether. Mm-hmm. So that's where that's where you produce a massive orgone or scalar field. Mm-hmm. So this will fill a room, and it, great for a dream session, meditation, brain boost, and so forth. But I think it's also significant because you can look at it. It's a very regular pattern. It's a 12-point coil that I have in there. Mm-hmm. The coherence is basically the order, like a crystal. Because I don't care how carefully you try to wrap like a Mobius coil, which is just like a wire that you bend into a U and then you twist it. Mm-hmm. It's never going to be as exact as this kind of coil. So if you are into some of the more far out kinds of things like the radionics, which mm-hmm. Can be used for homeopathy, but on the far end, you can use for boosting thought forms and manifestation. Mm-hmm. You could use any kind of power device, but that's kind of more the shotgun approach because you're throwing out this massive field and just like as a carrier wave, like boosting your thought forms. Mm-hmm. But if you use this, it's like a laser beam. And I think for the coherence, like getting into the target and then intensifying and boosting your thought forms, which, I'm kind of getting far out there, but I think your audience is pretty advanced. Yeah. This is a great tool. And I can tell you that I think I'm being helped in many ways from people, but then I think I'm also just like, it's coming through me now, like when you hear people say, God's working through me. It's like, if I look 5 years ago, I'm like, how the hell did I come to this point? Yeah.
Well, I think that's what was going on with Reich. I mean, I think once Reich got into the production of Orgone and the exploration of Orgone, he was tapping into a big field and it was communicating with him. And giving him some more insight, info, and intel. Let me bring up another image here. Give people kind of an insight into some of the other factors. Let me bring up this one. Okay, this I think this gives people a sense as to how this actually works in terms of being able to plug in, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. You want to break that down?
Sure. Okay. So you could see this is powered. This is one of my earlier. I mean, this particular pyramid, I think I've been doing for maybe 2 years. This is probably one of the first castings I did. You can see it has that Rodin donut coil, but in the back, that's Berkana Labs from UK, and Adam. He works with radionics, which is actually a kind of homeopathic discipline science that was invented here in America. You know, America actually has some strong, especially this guy Abrams. He was a very decorated medical physician in San Francisco. And I think West Coast, Rife, also he was from San Diego. California has a lot of Aquarian things on the positive side. Robert, in the modern times, because this kind of thing has existed going back thousands of years, but in modern times, Americans have actually come up with some really next level things. But of course, it got shut down by FDA in like the 50s. And so a lot of these things with the radionics, you'll find in UK, overseas. And basically, you can have a frequency generator. So it puts out an output at a certain voltage, at a certain waveform, like square, sine wave, so forth, at a certain frequency, run it into the input of that board in the back, right? You can tune the dials to certain numbers. Some of these numbers will correspond to certain organs, certain substances, like there's even a rate for vitamin C. And then you can broadcast it either through the board. You see there's the input and output. Or if you attach my pyramid to the output of this board, it boosts it to another level, because you could see there's actually a 2D pyramid antenna printed in the chipboard underneath that input and output circle. So there's actually scalar antennas, and that scalar energy is this etheric energy, right? So it's the quantum dimension. So you could, and people that do remote healing, that's how it happens, because we as human beings are scalar generators. We receive and we transmit these energies. But you can take that to the technical side and use tools that have this also. And so if you attach my pyramid, it's like a Orgone cannon. Right. Like the carrier wave to really boost it out there. So on one end, radionics can be used like a homeopathy. You can send rates to balance energies. You can make homeopathic tinctures or liquids people can drink. So you can actually imprint an influence onto a substance, like a placebo pill or a water sample, and they can take it, and the body will react just like as you took the actual substance. Yeah, interesting. You can copy, and you could take a master pill, say like aspirin, copy it onto because it's like the holographic imprint of the structure of it. Yeah. Imprint it onto a water sample or a placebo pill. Take that, same thing. But now when you get to the far end, you can start doing manifestation, the boosting the thought form. And, usually on the output, you can you need to target or send it to some place or person, right? You can have a DNA sample, like a fingernail clipping, or you can write the person's name, or you can use a photograph, because that is the holographic representation of the person. Right. You run the frequency, and that person will start receiving the frequency. So this totally blows away the standard 3D thinking of how people usually accept reality works. But in actual fact, it starts to teach you what the Vedics always knew, that, when they say in the spiritual or religious sense, we are all one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it goes back to the fact that we are actually all composed of the same source energy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when you talk about this Neptunian, the Piscean energies where we merge.
Mm-hmm.
This is how we are able to do psychic readings, because you and me, we're not separated. I can totally read into you, and you can read into me. And we can send energies, and it's very interesting. The scalar, or the orgone field, the ether field, there's no distance dimension.
That's right.
So you can go to the opposite side of the planet. You can probably go to the moon, and I can send you mental thoughts or energies, healing and otherwise.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting, because I didn't do this all in like one day. It's like over a period of years. I have good associations with Berkana Labs. People could check them out, berkanalabs.store in UK. And Robert, a lot of these devices, they used to cost thousands of dollars. You know how much that board in the back cost?
How much?
$150 shipped.
Yeah, I remember back in the 90s when I was exploring this material, and radionics really popped onto my screen. And I was looking at some of those radionic devices, which I think were made in Germany, if I'm not mistaken. And, we're talking $3,000 for a radionic device, a radionic output. And now, what, $150? I mean,
yeah, I mean, you're going to have to buy a generator too. But basically, I think, Berkana Labs, it not only is the price point, I mean, he's basically doing it for humanity, because he's putting it at a price that anyone can afford. But, and I haven't dealt with a lot of radionics machines, but his board is very good. His board is very powerful. And, I would suggest, though, Robert, that for people that are interested or just coming into it, it's very key. If you want to be a well-rounded practitioner, you have to look at the spiritual side, because technically you can do anything with this,
right?
But then comes the karmic layer. So it's like you have to know that there's a spiritual framework that informs all of this, And I know for myself, I'm not ashamed to admit this, but I know in some other timeline, some past life, I did some pretty dark stuff.
Right.
But that was kind of a juvenile stage.
Sure.
And I know now that, there's just, you can do anything you want, but nothing comes for free, and there's always a blowback, because then again, this is why the Vedics, they never initiated attacks. It was always defense, or they did the Aikido thing, and they reflected the attacks against the opponent. Because you and I actually, I don't care if you're a reptilian or whatever, we're actually, the opposing side is some mere aspect of yourself.
That's right.
So it's like you never want to, I don't care, people shouldn't do bad things, but you always have to keep that in mind, that that we're all one.
Yeah, there's an energetic whiplash when you get outside of a certain field of parameters, right? When self is overly involved, that's when self gets feedback, right? I mean, this is what takes place. I was watching a documentary the other night, and I was talking with Steve and Chris about this last night, and it was a documentary on the Crusades, and there was a great general named Saladin who was able to defeat the Second Crusader army, and really in a very decisive and brutal, in our times, and that time it was just how you did war, way, and then retake Jerusalem. So the Third Crusade starts off, and the Third Crusade is led by Richard the Lionhearted, who was a great warrior and a great tactician. And Saladin had amazing respect for Richard the Lionhearted. And Richard the First had a plan in place, and the plan was exactly what you were talking about with the Vedic model of being defensive. And what he did is he set out on a march that was headed towards a specific city, where theoretically that's where the battle was going to take place. But what Richard the Lionhearted was doing is he was setting up a defensive column. So he was forcing Saladin and his troop to come in again and again and again to force the battle, so that he would be on the defensive and that he would wind up actually being able to exploit a particular weakness, but even from kind of this place of the moral high ground, so to speak, right? Mm-hmm. They were defending themselves. And that's where I think there's a really interesting kind of lesson in that, right? And when we get into the astrological version of that, that connects into the sign of Cancer. And mm-hmm. Cancer is a cardinal sign, but it is not a sign that is it's not aggressive. It is to some extent reactive and responsive. It is very protective. And now we're in the true node phase, where the ascending plane of the moon is in the sign of Cancer. Mm-hmm. So this gets into this whole timeline, or this piece that we're in now, where we can find tools where we can defend ourselves, right? And we can begin to be in a place where, you know, we're not actually actively promoting any kind of assault or action on the dominant paradigm or on the matrix or whatever you want to frame it or phrase it. But we put ourselves in a position where if we need to, we can take care of ourselves and we can defend our own self-interest. And I think this is a really beautiful tool for people to do that. So let's say people get into Orgone, they want to make their stuff, and they go, well, I really want to figure out how to get to the next level and start to work with radionics and start to work with these boards and the Rife machines. I mean, that's whole next level. Do you offer people like instruction on how to do that and how to plug in at that level?
I have a Patreon where I'm giving some video tutorials. Mm-hmm. So I have a lot of stuff on my YouTube. It's Akaida TV on YouTube. But I really think that some of these things should not be broadcast to the general public.
Sure.
Because it's you have to have, you know, if you're working with like a Orgone pyramid like this, it's pretty much fail safe. You can't go wrong. But right. You start dealing with, you know, it's just like if you learn Reiki or whatever, the power to heal is a power to kill with just a flip of the frequency, right? So
that's right.
You have to have some kind of a moral compass and understanding of the framework for the more advanced work. Mm-hmm. So I've put that kind of behind a paywall. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I think, you know, people now we have more like technical advantage of being able to put together things. You can go on eBay and buy like laser LEDs and things to do like light therapy that like, you know, Tesla or Rife would be like, you guys have it so easy. It's just off the shelf. They had to like build the stuff themselves. But
yeah,
you know, I would say just start reading up on it. And I think the mindset should be just, you know, it's like one of the most basic but profound concepts that people know from Chinese culture, the yin yang or the yin yang. Mm-hmm. But, you know, one of the oldest representations of the yin yang symbol is on some Slavic pottery. So there was, you know, we think we're very separated, but it was not that long ago, maybe just a few hundred years ago, that the cultures were, you know, just like right now, how the Western culture dominates the world as the modern culture. Mm-hmm. But there was another culture that dominated the world that has been written out of history. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yeah. Oh, you threw up on the screen. So yeah, this is the power pyramid. You could see, this is just a basic frequency generator. I sell it at cost just to include it with the pyramid. Mm-hmm. But you need some generator to drive the frequency through the pyramid. Mm-hmm. Some people use the Spooky 2 Rife machine, which I have a loose association with. This is it's a frequency generator just like the one you see in the photo. Mm-hmm. But it's it has software, so they have a database now of like 30,000 frequencies. And this for people that haven't heard of Rife, Royal Raymond Rife, he was a scientist machinist, which is probably why doctors didn't like him, because he surpassed what they were doing by leagues in like the 1920s. This guy Rife, he built a microscope that could see live bacteria and viruses that wasn't equaled until like maybe 15 something years ago. You know, like the scanning electron microscope, they have to kill everything, and you just see like the shell of the bacteria or the ant, the insect or whatever.
Right.
But Rife, the key thing about his microscope is he was dealing with frequency therapy. In America, we cannot say healing, so we'll say he was experimentation. It was frequency therapy. And the idea of his Rife machines was, I think everybody has heard of or seen the concert singer. She hits a certain pitch and the wine glass at a certain point just shatters, right?
Yep.
That's because everything has an innate resonant frequency. Everything has a frequency. And if you hit that frequency hard and long enough, the thing will just implode. So every bacteria has a frequency, every virus has a frequency. And so, you know, there's this kind of hysteria you might have seen online, like, oh, we've ran out of all of the antibiotics. Well, guess what? In like I think it was the 1930s, they did a medical trial at USC and like around 16, 20, terminal cancer patients. They healed, I think, every single one. It might have been like 99%. They had a banquet for Rife with 40 plus, the top physicians in the US. It was called the End of Disease, the banquet. But what happened? They drag them through court. It's very similar to Wilhelm Reich.
Yeah,
he died
absolutely.
He died a broken, penniless man. But the concept and the technology carried on. And now China, Spooky 2 is led by John White. He's a New Zealander. He lives in China now. So, the factory, you're buying direct from the factory. So where these would probably have been like $10,000+ before, you can get a setup for a couple $100, the basic setup. And so that's once China starts making it, it's out there. They clone everything, right?
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah.
And let me say one more thing. A key thing about what the Spooky 2 company did, and there's other companies out there using what they call quantum remote or scalar remote. You can see this. This is the newest one. DNA sample goes in here, typically fingernail clipping. The old way was you were with electrical contacts, like TENS pads, like the hospital, those little sticky pads with electrical lead.
Yeah. That's
how you would get it, through contact, just through electrical current through the body. Frequency to kill bacteria or whatever. And Rife was using a plasma ball, like a child's novelty ball. You see the plasma streamers. That plasma actually throws off a RF, a radio wave, which will pass completely through the body, and you can receive the frequency that way. But in 2014, Spooky 2 came out with a quantum remote. That means the same kind of concept or technology that I'm using in the pyramid, but this is a smaller format.
Right.
Put the sample in here, run the frequency. There's 2 scalar coils inside here. As soon as the frequency hits the holographic piece of your DNA, you can go to work, get the frequency. You can go on vacation. Quantum entanglement, right?
Yeah.
Holographic world. And it's very convenient, Like I actually have the more expensive, like it's like something like a $2,000 setup with the plasma ball and everything. Right. Robert, I barely use it. You could run this and you could leave the house. That's the thing, you don't have to be in front of the setup. So, and it can be used also not just for so-called, can't say healing, therapy, but you can use this to send like vitamin frequencies, toning frequencies. I have a buddy that has gout, and then the difference between him running like arthritis and gout frequencies versus not is like you shouldn't do this. He likes to brag about it. he can drink coffee and do all the things you're not supposed to do and walk around. But there was one time at work. This is because people say, well, how do you know? Isn't it placebo? I don't understand how this holographic stuff works. He was at work and he got that tingle on the foot. The gout people know.
Yeah.
He was like, uh-oh. He went home, the machine had turned off. So so how, if that's a coincidence, if that's placebo, that's pretty coincidental, right? But yeah, it just goes to show you that this whole thing is about taking the power back in your hands is very powerful because fear is the mind killer. And so they're telling people we've run out of all the antibiotics, the plagues are coming. I'm cool. I got my little remotes here. I got my Rife machine. You can throw anything you want at me,
Right, exactly.
So it's like, well, we ran out of antibiotics, but guess what? 100 years ago, they already figured out, Rife already figured out, well, we'll just use frequency. We're using energy, which is totally Aquarian, right? That's the positive side of Aquarius is
absolutely.
Because on the one side, you have things like ionizing radiation, plutonium, Wi-Fi, HARP. But on the other side, we have things that can benefit us, but not just say shield out and protect us from the Wi-Fi. We could use it to increase our health, but then it starts really bumping up your mental and you could say spiritual. And I wanted to bring this in too. Is one of the main things, I think, a major theme with the transhumanism and the AI. It's a complete misunderstanding of creation. It's a misunderstanding, or it's a very blinders look at what is the human being. Because in reality, we are half material and we are half energetic or energy, but you can call energy spirit. So these transhumanists and the AI people, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be a chunk of humanity that goes that way, but it's just so regressive. They're total materialists. Like, I want to, live forever. It's like, hey, retard, you do live forever. Your ego self may fade, but the energy cannot be created or destroyed. It just transmutes.
Right.
So it's like that this is what they call, satanic or Luciferian mindset, right?
Absolutely.
It's like I rule the 3D. I want to rule forever.
Right.
I'm going to upload my consciousness to a chip, which I don't even think is really possible. That's something, but it's not you.
Right.
And it's like, the Buddha said, this too shall pass. I don't care if you live 1,000,000 years. At some point, you are going to return to the source.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
I mean, basically what we have is we've got a group of people, very small group of people who have accrued massive amounts of money and resources during a time when technology theoretically might provide them with an answer so that they can use those massive resources that they've accrued for a much longer period of time, right? People have had significant amount of resources throughout the ages, but the technology has not said, well, we can extend your life by 50, 100, 200, 250 years so that you can play king of the planet, that much longer. And I think that's where it's all sort of being generated from. And that gets into the sort of the dark spot of the materialism. And it's like the riches that are available to the spirits are far greater than that people realize on this plane of existence. And yet we're playing in 3D, and yet we're playing in a realm where there are materials, there are resources, and having the assets to be able to access them are important. But it's all about balance, and it's all about understanding what that balance is. I wanted to throw up a little picture here. This is apparently you do workshops in the 3D setting. Now, are these people that are actually doing live production where you're at?
This was in Mid-City in LA. My buddy Josh, he runs a art warehouse. So this was a couple of years ago. And so, one of the great things, Robert, is this is not rocket science. You could make something in one afternoon.
Yeah.
Again, it may not be as clean as if you did it, like basically I want to make art too, right? But
Yeah.
it's gonna work. And so you can see they have some cups of the polyester plastic resin.
Mm-hmm.
You add a little hardener or catalyst, just like Bondo, if everybody's done like work on their car or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You have metal shavings. This comes from the pyramid store. It's called eBay.
Mm-hmm.
Right? A lot of the pigments, we just did clear this day, but a lot of the pigments are actually metallic.
Mm-hmm.
So that is like I use mica powder that they use in soaps a lot. If you ever seen soaps, it has that sparkly sheen.
Mm-hmm.
Mica is electrically conductive, but if it has colors, it's coated in titanium.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a nano metal, which
Mhm.
I did it mainly for the color. Like you'll see a lot of my pyramids are like gold color or something, but it's like a nano metal. So that adds to the power. And the typical shapes you're going to see, usually pyramid, but sometimes you'll see little muffins that
Yeah.
actually comes from muffin mold.
Mm-hmm.
And those they call tower busters. And why are they called tower busters? Because Don Croft,
I was gonna ask you about the Crofts. I was gonna go there.
Well, Don, the
Yeah.
Crofts.
Yeah. He's got wild
To
stories.
me, some of their stories are a little out there, but you gotta give the man credit because he came up with the mix that is standard today.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not gonna even gratify this guy by saying his name because he came after me. He's the man that put the copyright on Orgonite.
Mm-hmm.
Which is I don't use Orgonite on my site. I actually had some of my social media accounts taken down. When I had like a couple of years ago, I had like thousands of followers.
Because you had Orgonite in the.
Yeah, he tried to shake people down. This guy, he actually did come up with the term Orgonite, but he was using a mix of just resin and metal particles.
Mm-hmm.
But it was Don Croft that added the key component of the quartz crystal.
Mm-hmm.
Because quartz crystal, I think people that work with quartz, they know stones, crystals. Quartz crystal is like a go-to because it's high energy.
Mm-hmm.
It's an amplifier. It's used in industry as such, and it's oscillator. It has a very even vibration.
Mm-hmm.
So if you add it to this mix of materials, it stabilizes it and keeps the energy high, which was one problem that Wilhelm Reich ran into.
Right.
His devices were accumulators. And at the time he was working, let's say the 30s to the 50s, the environment was a lot cleaner than it is today.
Yeah.
And so when they started doing the atomic bomb tests, he had to stop at some points because it started to draw in what he called the DOR, the deadly orgone.
Right.
And the ionizing radiation would start to be pulled into his devices.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have a generator that has like the quartz component, and if you put shungite in there, it kicks it up like to another level.
Right.
The energy is always high, so you don't really have to clean it, or you don't have the stagnation.
Yeah.
So yeah, anybody. So it's a great thing. And going back to the Tower Busters, John Croft came up with what he called the gifting movement. So not only is it DIY, where you could make it yourself, instructions online, just go look up like Orgonite 101 or Orgone Pyramid 101. But people would gift areas in their neighborhood. Like if there's a cell phone tower, they would walk by, maybe check a couple pieces by the cell phone tower, and it actually flips the energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't really gift myself, like drop pieces in my neighborhood, but what I do, and I don't really advertise this, but domestic orders, I will typically, if I have it around, I'll stick a couple free muffins in along with a pyramid so that people get extra coverage. Because I recommend first pyramid on the bedstand because sleep is a time when your body recharges and repairs the most.
Right.
So put the pyramid on your bedstand. But everybody, they'll have like a Wi-Fi router or something, so they can put the muffins somewhere else. So that's my way of gifting, because I know if I send it out, the people are going to use it, and it's going direct to them. So I've probably sent out over the last 5 years, probably like 400 pyramids, 400 basic pyramids, and probably a similar amount of those Tower Buster muffins. Right. And I'm actually winding these down now. So last couple months, I'm going to offer these full time because, hey man, I did it for 5 years.
Yeah, right.
This is all like, you work for yourself. So, and I'm doing this by hand.
Yeah.
I can't maintain the pace anymore. So I'm starting to shift to just more instruction, doing meditation classes and then power devices. But next couple months, I'll have these. But, I think that from what I've seen, the number of people making the Orgone pyramids has probably quadrupled in the last couple of years. And it's growing all the time. So that's what I'm saying too. It's like the changes and shifts that we're encountering now, Robert, it's intense. But at the same time, we're kind of part of a collective consciousness that we don't have a total control of. It's like those flock of birds and they just flip and they just change direction. What causes that? It's like the mass consciousness, the people that have it in them are naturally seeking out what they need to have now. And that's God or spirit or whatever you want to call it.
Right. Well, we're in a time of like a lot of adaptability and being able to, change our game and up our game. And that's part of what's going on here, and it takes it out of the realm of victimhood. These things are happening to us. We don't have any power, right? You have choice. You have the ability to make adjustments and alterations and improvements to your life and your lifestyle and your relationships, and incorporating these really interesting and unique technologies that could also improve and amplify the same thing. So these are acts of empowerment. Making the stuff is an act of empowerment, employing it, learning about it. I mean, there's so many things we can do. And that gets us out of that polarity. Okay, there's this side and there's this side. Well, in astrology, when you have an opposition, you find the midpoint. Well, the midpoint in this operation is figuring out activities and ways in which you get out of that polarity. You make yourself stronger, healthier, improve the quality of your life. And that has a ripple effect with everybody else.
One thing that you mentioned recently, but I have been feeling for many years, maybe going back to the point where I was saying I felt a great release or a relief or something was lifted off my shoulders. I felt my life change when I realized that I was doing something. I did something with my hands. It was concrete. I did something, and maybe it was small, maybe it's one by one, but the change was there. Is you've talked about, I think it's the Dionysian to the Apollonian. Practical application. It's time. I'm still, I'm right at the crack of Scorpio. So, I'm a Scorpio sun, Taurus rising. And actually, it's interesting. There's at least 3 people I know that are deep into energy tools, have a strong Taurus aspect. I think because we're working with the earth materials and
absolutely.
Like that. But that relief of okay, now we've kind of like learned enough, and we're gonna move forward. I'm still gonna be looking at the new stuff on the side, but I think that the time for learning a lot of this stuff maybe was winding down around 2012. And now we're going active. We're going operational. It's like, okay, you spent the time kind of learning you kind of have a feel for the framework of what's going on in the world now. But now practically, what are you going to do to better yourself? And another thing I want to say is, I'm stone cold LA. I was born and grown in LA, but I have gotten a lot of support from the South and the Southeast. And I think one thing that maybe connects me is I spent a lot of time listening to Patriot Radio.
Right. Yeah.
So I know the lingo, but if you take that whole idea of the sovereign citizen, state citizen, apply it to the energetic.
Absolutely.
Like I'm a sovereign person, like in my house, or let's say to arm's length, this is my space. And that is a God-given right. That is a universal law.
Absolutely.
So you have the laws of the universe behind you if you understand it. So in addition to using, energy tools, do that internally, do energetic cleaning, grounding, just like you ground electrical equipment, energetically. If you, and this is common in like Eastern, like Qigong or Reiki, but I actually learned Hermetic style. But since it's a framework, you're still dealing with chakras and those kinds of things. But if you do your energetic balancing, your cleaning, and just my observation, the people that are really tuned in and kind of got this spiritual thing going on, we got a lot of stuff to clean out, karmic stuff and all that. Once you start healing yourself and balancing yourself, where you get off balance and where the attacks can come through is like there's sort of like cracks in your energetic field. They're like traumas, old stuff. It might even be so-called past life stuff or whatever. When you start to clear that out, there's less and less points where you can get hit from.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So if you combine this, you can call it energy work, but you can call it spiritual, same thing. I feel, we are facing some crazy times. I've even, I don't know if I told you, I had some prophetic dreams about 5G. Kind of disturbing.
Yeah.
But I had no fear. I had no fear about kind of, I don't know if it's what can happen or what will happen. But I feel myself and people that are kind of in this area, we're going to be fine. The other people that are unconscious and let themselves be bathed in that radiation, I don't know. They're probably going to, if you project forward, they're probably going to turn into a unisex alien gray in like 10,000 years. But
right, exactly.
I think maybe this is where the human race kind of splits.
Yeah, it really feels like we're at that fork in the road on so many levels.
But we can only do what we do. And I'll say this, I don't know if it makes sense to me, maybe it makes sense to other people. I kind of feel that all timelines are running parallel.
Yeah.
But if we just hold our space where we are now in our timeline, that's the best you can do. And just kind of like don't fall into the fear mentality. Be informed, but just understand you could have, once you're covered, you can actually have fun with this. It's very interesting, especially people that listen to your show or into the metaphysical area. It's fun to become active. I spent many years, probably 20 years, being inactive. Just kind of from the observer point, Spent a long time like cleaning my own stuff out. But once you start to become active and working with these tools, that's power.
Absolutely. And it's even if it's at a small scale level, it's manufacturing. You're manufacturing something. You're producing something.
Yeah.
The manufacturing and production process was really taken out of our hands in the early part of the 20th century when we have industrialization. And it's a way to take some of that manufacturing industrialization power back. Hey, let me see if we can get some questions from people in the chat room. If you have any questions for Maz about Orgone, about the process, anything that you want to bring up here, I think we're pretty game. In the meantime, while you guys are formulating some of your questions, you've got an online webinar tomorrow, don't you?
Oh, well, I have a Patreon. It's Pyramid Power.
Okay.
Patreon. And I was kind of keeping it, just for my little group, but we're on Robert's show. So I'm kind of doing it's not really private, but the people that have been following me, I'm going to do what's a 4 weeks. So like 1 month, the energy work.
Okay.
And it's very simple, but it's the foundation of all energy work, which is the grounding, visualizing a circulation of energy in your body. Same concept as Chinese medicine, right? Clean flow. And the last is cleaning your energy, or the so-called chakra cleaning. It's basic, but actually it's more important. It's like in martial arts or capoeira. the white belt is actually the most important because that's your foundation.
Mm-hmm.
You can learn, technically you can do a lot of advanced technique,
Mm-hmm.
but if you don't have the solid foundation, it's not going to work. So it's actually these basic techniques.
Mm-hmm.
You could call it just like balancing, keeping
Mm-hmm.
yourself clean. That's what we're going to be teaching. And then in the future, I'm going to be doing more advanced stuff, which actually leads to, psychic viewing, psychic work.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if anybody's ever considered this, but if you are doing, hands-on healing or that kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
you're already doing psychic work, because to perceive the energy, like, oh, it's kind of like dark or heavy here, there's a blockage here. If you just take that one step abstract and just mock it up in your mind,
Mm-hmm.
you're doing psychic reading. Like you can say, okay, what's going on? So
Mm-hmm.
that's really interesting. Yeah. So that's the direction that I'm still doing pyramids. I'm working on bigger ones, bigger power pyramids and so forth. But I'm very comfortable doing that. And now I think it's time this year, especially Jupiter and Sag, right? Be a little adventurous, start pushing new things.
Mm-hmm.
Gonna start teaching things that helped me a lot, but then also allowed me to really take my pyramids to a next level, which was the energetic work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let me see. We've got one question here, and maybe perhaps a little bit of controversy.
Okay.
Let's see. What do we got? Somebody asked about C60. Chris and Steve asked about C60. What's your take on C60? Are you familiar with that stuff at all?
Yeah. Okay. Well, C6. Well, shungite is fullerene, or it's a C60. They're doing some work upstairs, so I'm sorry if you hear some.
That's okay.
Talking.
That's all right. Yeah.
But I actually spent a fair amount of money to make my own
C60.
Yeah. You know what? Maybe I haven't taken enough or whatever, but I feel like colloidal silver is stronger to me than the C60. I spent about $500 to set up the whole thing, because I was thinking, maybe I'll sell some too. But you know what?
Right.
For me, I would, I love shungite.
Yeah.
But for me, the C60, this is just my personal opinion. Maybe I did it the wrong way or something, but I just, I get more, that I can recognize. I get more effect from like a colloidal silver or something. That may be an unpopular opinion, but that's just my experience. And I bought the C60 powder, which is expensive, man. For a gram, it's like $130, $150 a gram. And that gram will be enough for like 1 liter of oil. But yeah, I love shungite, which is C60. I make shungite water. I put it in my pyramids. But that's just me. So.
Okay. Let's see. What else do we have here? Anything else? The ring that Masaki showed in the beginning looks like slim spurling equipment.
Yeah. You want to talk about the tensor rings?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. I think I have a sphere. Oh, here. I have a sphere in here.
Right. Okay. There we go.
So, tensor rings. I thought this was total BS when I first encountered it, because basically, Robert, this is just copper wire that you can get from the hardware store. But this is extremely powerful. It's like having the power of a pyramid like this in your hand. Is very lightweight, because it's kind of difficult to walk down the street. It's kind of weird with it. It's like, yeah, I'm covered. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But you can wear a little pendant that's very lightweight and very strong. So they're right. Slim Sperling. He was the one that brought back the tensor, what they call the tensor tool or tensor ring technology in the 90s. And basically, it works like this. If you have a wire, right, cut to any length. I'll use a pen as an example. So you cut a wire to a certain length. It's going to vibrate just like a tuning fork. Okay. But if you cut it to the lengths, the measuring lengths they used in the ancient world, such as the megalithic structures, Giza pyramid, the typical ones like the one that I'm wearing, is they call harmony and balance, or the Teotihuacan pyramid. Okay, so a lot of these structures, this tells you too, they may have been stone construction, but they were far more advanced than we are in many ways, because they had a deep understanding of frequency and resonance. You could call spirit too. And so basically, if you cut that wire to, like, say the Royal Egyptian cubit in the Giza pyramid, or the Teotihuacan cubit, then it's vibrating at a very particular frequency. Okay. Now you take that wire and you solder it into a loop like this. Okay. But no twist, just like a single wire with the solder. One side is positive and one side is negative. Okay. But if you put a helix twist in it, you can see this, right? If you put a helix twist and then you solder it, no polarity, both sides are positive. This is 0 point. This is that cancellation, the Tesla's 0 point, because it goes back to what I was talking about with the coil in my pyramid, is that if you have two fields, electromagnetic fields in opposition, and basically they cancels, it goes to that etheric layer, right? Well, where's the energy coming from? There's no input like the frequency generator here. It's coming from all the Wi-Fi radio waves and all that. So it's not, it's not like powered, but as it hits the wire, the two wires have a weak field that's canceling continuously. So this is a way that you could have a very powerful tool in a lightweight form. So I recommend the combination of using Orgone pyramids and tensor rings. And so this tells you too, because the amount of material in here is not that much.
That's right.
You can get it at the hardware store. Okay.
Yeah.
It's here, Robert.
Yeah.
It's just the understanding of where we're living in.
Right.
The energetic world. So and there's talk about they're trying to shut down the pyramids on Etsy and other. Well, guess what? I don't make Orgone pyramids. I make art pyramids.
Art pyramids.
I make copper jewelry. That's just like.
So is that true? They're trying to shut down people selling Orgone pyramids on Etsy?
I've heard things, but you know what? How are they going to stop it? Come on, man.
Right.
What are you going to say? You can't make pyramid-shaped sculptures.
Yeah.
So it's all here, and at the end of the day, and this point's probably coming, where you're going to have to decide how far you're going to go in this system.
That's right.
Because I'm probably like anybody else. I'm cracked out on my phone. I'm on the internet all day. But there's going to come a point where you're going to have to decide what you're going to do. But it's the same thing with these tools. When you start using this, you could consider it like, I'm just, I know it has the energy. I'm protecting myself. But you are starting to level up, and you are saying, I am sovereign. I don't agree with your frequencies, and I'm flipping it on you. So what you gonna do about it? Now, you archons or you reptoids or whatever they are, you guys are pumping out those frequencies, but I got this.
Right. Exactly.
That's my right.
Right.
That's my right.
Right. And if enough of us get to that place, all of a sudden we're looking at a larger frequency shift, right?
Yeah.
So
and I'll tell you what, the more people use this, you're not just helping yourself, you're helping the whole human race. You're helping.
That's exactly where I was going with it. Absolutely. Got another question from the chat room here. And this is from Susie, and it's actually a technical question.
Sure.
She asks, is there a ratio of quartz to use with the metal filings, resin, etc.?
Yeah, there's 5 crystals. And I usually overdo it. I always like to because I'll tell you an embarrassing story. There was one time when I was kind of running low, and I was like, I'll put a little smaller crystals in there. But I test my stuff.
Right.
It wasn't as strong. So I always overdo it. So
Yeah.
The setup that Don Croft came up with is there's one large crystal on the tip, and in the base you have 4 going in the directions like this, like in a cross.
Oh, interesting.
The tip, I weigh it out. I usually do 60 plus grams. The bottom, I eyeball it, but I overdo it, Robert. And then I put shungite chips into, and shungite is it's a natural EMF balancer stone. There's only one deposit. It's in Russia, in Karelia. So if you use shungite on its own is very powerful, but if you put it in a orgonite pyramid, I don't know what you could say, like it doubles the power, but it makes it much stronger. And I want to talk a little bit about the shape too, because this is very interesting. Any cone or pyramid shape creates a field effect. And the reason why a pyramid is a great shape to use is because, and this is called shape power. This is something that we are not taught in school. The very shape, and we all know about the cube.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
The cube has a certain energy. A pyramid is an amplifier. So anything you put in a cone or pyramid shape will be amplified. We know this, and I can assure people that everybody probably listening to this has a cone or pyramid in their house, and that is the stereo hi-fi system. Because those are basically, because if you take a pyramid and you spin it infinitely, what does it become? It becomes a cone, right?
Yes.
But what they don't tell you is, speaker cone, it'll amplify the sound, right? But what they don't tell you is it'll amplify any kind of energies. So you could cast this material in any shape, but if you cast it in a pyramid shape, it's far more powerful than if you just did it like in, say, like the muffins, the Tower Busters. And probably the worst shape to live in is a cube, because the circulation of energy is very bad.
Totally.
Which is Saturn energy, right?
Yeah.
But even worse than a cube is a metal cube. And what do we live in? So if like ETs or interdimensionals or high beings came down and they looked around, they go, oh man, these people are at a low consciousness. So the flip side of that, though, is besides working with these energy tools, the entire world has to be redone, because architecture and so forth, they never took into account the energetics. But a very interesting thing, if you look into, there's a field called biogeometry by, I think the guy's name is Kareem Ibrahim. He's Canadian Egyptian. And there's a field also called radiesthesia with the pendulum dowsing. They know about the hidden or occulted energies, right? Because your shapes have energy. If you have any kind of a dome or cone shape or pyramid shape, it will create a very strong spiritual energy. But there can be negative effects depending on how it's shaped. If you put a spire on top of a dome, or the very classic Russian onion dome, it negates any negative effects. So that tells you that it was not so long ago that even Russian Orthodox churches with those Kremlin with the onion dome.
The minarets. The minaret is a very powerful shape, and you see them across Orthodox churches and mosques. There's a reason it's there, right?
The Russians, you could say the Slavics, but like Ukrainians and Russians, they have done the most advanced pyramid research. And so if I say pyramid, right, where does your mind go to?
It goes to Egypt, of course, right?
Egypt. Yeah. Some people may say like step pyramid, but typically Giza, right?
Yeah.
Why Russia? Because why wouldn't the Mexicans or the Guatemalans be far in pyramid research?
Right.
Why wouldn't the Egyptian, actually biogeometry, he's Egyptian, but typically, if you're talking about like the shape power, torsion field, scalar, basically the old Slavs, like Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
They have a very deep understanding, and there's a deep reason for that too, because if you are interested in metaphysics and occult and these kinds of things, the steppes of Eurasia is a keynote. Blavatsky is from there, right?
That's right.
And that area, because I didn't have an interest in the whole Russia or Ukraine sphere until the war in like 2014, when America, they started the coup, right?
Right, Ukraine.
But that whole area, you could say like, well, there's these little countries in the stands, Uzbekistan, whatever. Robert, go look at like the books on Central Asia. There's very few in English, and the ones that have information, they're very expensive. There's a lot in like Cyrillic or Russian and so forth.
Yeah, no doubt.
There's a reason for that, because that is a key area. Central Asia is a key area of the planet's history.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting. The Russians are the masters of frequency and resonance, and they built some very large pyramid structures. The high slope pyramid, which they call Nubian pyramid, or Russian pyramid, or golden pyramid, because it's a perfect golden ratio. Listen to this. The guy, I believe his name was Alexander Golod, Ukrainian military contractor, built these. What does that tell you?
Yeah, well, they're dialed in. You know, a few years ago, I had a guy who was sort of the de facto expert on these Bosnian pyramids.
Oh yeah.
Have you seen that guy's work? I forget his name.
But Dr. Sam?
Yeah, these Bosnian pyramids are massive. I mean, they're enormous. Have you gotten into them at all?
Well, I've read about them.
Yeah.
But that pyramid, the Bosnian pyramids, I think it's a pyramid complex.
Yes.
I think they said it's around 30,000 years old. So these probably they may have not even been like modern human.
Right.
You know, every cycle, the form of the humanoid is tweaked a little bit. But yeah, I mean, they've done the studies. There's a energy coming off the top of the Bosnian pyramid. It's at a very particular frequency and so forth. But you know, I mean, you could talk about the whole pyramid subject.
Yeah, we do a whole show with that.
But I'll tell you that they are aligned to certain star systems.
Absolutely.
They balance the planet and so forth. And you know, I think people are, if they've looked into it, the whole thing about slaves, you know, moving blocks to build Giza, no, I don't think so.
Right.
I don't think so.
Well,
I just want to say one more thing. You know, there's a particular, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but there's a particular, association with some of these pyramids like Giza to, Orion. And, the swastika is connected to Orion. It's the I think it's a Big Dipper. The 4 seasons, it creates a swastika. And the swastika also is it's like a vortex energy. Yeah, and it also represents that we all come from the singular source. Yeah.
If anybody really wants to get a real feel for the pyramid energy, and if you're living in the United States, not that far away, you mentioned Teotihuacan, and they have the Temple of the Sun and the Temple of the Moon there. And and I've been to both of the temples, right? And the energy is so tremendous. I mean, it's tremendous. So when you're up on top of the Temple of the Sun, you are locked into that solar energy in a big way. And then you go over to the Temple of the Moon, and the feeling is so different. I mean, even like, the assemblage of people, there are people there, they're singing, they're hanging out, and, they're drinking wine and making out a little bit. And the Temple of the Sun, none of that is happening. Temple of the Sun, you're there for a specific reason. So it's very fundamental, but you can experience the difference between the two energies through those pyramids. Really fascinating.
Well, in Europe and in Japan, they have a like a tradition of, mountains are very spiritual places, and people take pilgrimage or weekend trip. What do you think a mountain is? It's basically a pyramid.
Right.
And, when you scale up any kind of cone shape to that size, it doesn't even have to be a perfect pyramid. You will have a higher concentration of this so-called orgone etheric energy coming off the tip. So you will have peak spiritual experiences if you go to, a real pyramid, but even a high mountain. Yeah.
Well, let me see. We'll do one more little sweep here. The chat room. I guess the last question comes from Lynn, aka Finka. Where do you get your spirulina energy tools?
Well, I have an artisan in India, but I'm actually working with him because I specified how I wanted it. And one thing, this is just my style, what I feel I like, but many people are telling me like, oh, you should use a thicker gauge on my wire wrapping around the antenna coils. But sometimes these things just kind of happen by happenstance. But because the coil I'm using is it's like 50 millimeters, something like that, maybe 2 inches across. I had to use very small gauge wire. But what I found, at least, I'm doing it this way, and I'm not gonna change. It's like the number of twists and the number of wrappings that you can get is more key than the size of the wire for me.
Interesting.
And it's so my pendant that I have on my shop, I said I want it small. I want it very, thinner gauge, thick enough so you just can't bend it, but small enough so we can get a lot of wraps. And one thing I want to learn this year is dowsing with the pendulum. But the way I'm testing things is just purely by looking at it, perceiving it, and then doing muscle tests. But the artisan I'm working with, he does dowsing, and they have slide rules and pendulum, and he says I'm getting the same thing that you're getting, which is interesting. So I influenced him, but I don't have the time to. You need a acetylene torch and brass solder. You can't just use you could use a chef's butane torch, but you would only be able to use like the lead tin solder. And for a wearable pendant, it's better to have brass solder.
Yeah.
But so we bounce stuff back and forth. So tensor tools that I have, some that are gold plated. Those are mainly for radionics use, because the gold component is like a very high energy. So you could use just a regular brass, say for like this 3-dial board. This is Berkana Labs. So you would put like, say, the influence that you want on this side.
Yeah.
And then I make little Orgone booster disc you put on here. You would put like the target, like a DNA sample, photograph, so forth. And then you could put a piece of quartz to boost it more, or you could attach my pyramid. But if you have a tensor ring, you could use, just the copper one. You see it pretty much fits right here. But I have some ones plated in gold because that'll kick it up. And I don't know if, I don't know how many of your, actually, you know what? We're actually doing this every day because we're manifesting every day. It's just that most people are putting self-limiting thoughts in their mind. And what I say, and I've said this on different shows, you do not, for EMF stuff, get some tools. But for the energy work and the radionics and so forth, you don't really need any of those tools. But if you understand how to work the energies and so forth, it's a difference between, well, you can walk, or you could have a bicycle, or you can drive a car. So it's just, if you know that you're putting, kicking, you have to think just by thinking a thing every day, you will start to make things happen, which is why the Buddha said, be mindful, because thought becomes action. The whole as above, so below. It starts in this invisible energy field that descends into the 3D. And the time to manifestation is becoming quicker and quicker, because, as they say, these veils are thinning. And the Aquarian age, we're starting to push up into this kind of like this energetic realm.
That's right.
So the 3D things are still there, but the energetic is starting to come in. So just starting to work with some of the stuff is where we're going, really. This is sort of like the people that are into this kind of stuff. They're sort of the forerunners of what's coming. But people are doing this every day. But if you start to kind of, even just like reading books, there's a book called The Secret Art. I think the guy's name is Duncan Laurie, about radionics. It's not a how-to, but it tells you the history of the field of radionics. Very interesting, because the guy Abrams, he was a medical physician, a very decorated medical physician in San Francisco. He started working basically with radionics. It wasn't called, I forgot what he called it. It wasn't called radionics at that time. And they were getting results. But then he started, what blew his mind is he found out he could use a proxy. Like, if you've ever seen muscle testing, you don't actually need to have the person there. Or he could take a blood sample and have the person hold the blood sample of a person that's not there and like test them. I don't think he was using muscle tests at the time, but basically you get the idea. If you just have a holographic piece of the person, you can run a diagnostic. But the problems came in, one, probably because it works, but two is in the 40s, 50s, and so on, when the FDA started looking at some of these machines, they took them apart and say like this. If this was like a box machine, they would take it apart, and sometimes there wouldn't even be wires connecting the dials.
That's right.
So they're thinking, this is total quackery, because how the hell does this thing even work? Yeah. Well, it works because it's not really the device. The trend that they call is coming from you, the operator. And the device is just, say this wasn't powered. It's a convention to train the mind. So you could start things just from thinking. You can, have a diagram, even an inkjet printout. If you put an intention on there, it'll start things in motion. So it's just very interesting, Robert. Like I wake up every day and I say, how the hell did I get here? But because it's my profession also. It's like there's no going back now. I'm too deep in, man.
Yeah, right. Point of no return. Hey, we got one more question here before we wrap up. And it's a technical question about the pyramids. How do you eliminate detrimental negative green?
That's what I was saying. Yeah. There's a energy called negative green, and depending on the horizontal or vertical waves, it could be very spiritual, or it could be cause your body to break down. I use muscle testing. Okay. So basically, if it's also called kinesthesiology. And it's very typical with holistic practitioners, like say herbalists and so forth. If you hold, first you get a baseline, dominant arm you put out, and then you try to keep it straight, and you have a person push down a couple times just to get the resistance level, right? Then you hold, say this was something bad like plutonium or something, right? You hold it. Or I was very interested to get a vial of vaccine. You can't get it for some reason. They won't let you get that. But if you say this was like a vaccine vial, right? It was bad for you. You hold it like this. Oh, one that will work for sure. People try this out. Cell phone, even on standby. You go like this, you push it down, it's going to be weaker. Because the kind of like your body vibration just dropped a level, and like the nerves kind of perceive the energy. Nerves are connected to the muscle, so it's a proxy. But if you have a strong tool, say like an Orgone pyramid, right? You hold it here, Do it again. If it's strong, the arm is gonna register.
Mhm.
And people say like, well, how do we know that's not placebo? You could put this on somebody's backside where they can't see it. As long as it's in your energetic field, it's gonna register.
Right.
So that's one way. And a lot of people, they don't like that because they want a meter that tells them what level. Right now, Robert, as far as I know, there's no meter commercially available that will tell you it's orgone level or whatever. The methods people are using are, the same muscle test for a quick, it's a yardstick, right? Or pendulum dowsing, or basically what they call calibration. Sometimes it's a slide rule,
Mhm.
So those are the two methods. But I've sent out, multiple hundreds of pyramids over the years. No problem. So
Good. All right.
But you know what? I'll just say this one other thing. Good to be skeptical because there is no certifying board right now.
Mhm.
Everybody's kind of doing their own thing. So it's very good to know what you're dealing with.
Mhm.
So good question.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that just about wraps it up for today. And I want to thank everybody who's attending, watching live and in the chat room. As always, really good questions and great interaction. So people can find you at akaida.com.
Akaida.com says akaida.com. Akaida TV on YouTube and Pyramid Power on Patreon.
And a lot of different like chutes and ladders and bells and whistles and ways to interact with you, from purchasing to learning to just getting instruction. So hey, thanks for coming on, Maz. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Robert.
Yeah, and this for you really is just the tip of the iceberg, because there's so much more to who you are as well. You're not just a guy that's just cranking out spiritual technology. There's a whole well in depth of knowledge that also goes along with you as well. Maybe have you back on some other time, talk about some of that other stuff. How's that sound?
Yeah, great.
All right, sounds good. Thanks again, man. Appreciate it. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be back on Sunday night. We'll be doing the 11th house, getting into some astrology. And until then, use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stay up on what's possible. Check out Maz's stuff, and have a great weekend. Ciao.